Okay, welcome everyone. We're almost ready to start. Less than a minute to go. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, so this Thursday we're continuing with our series on the Mahānāma Sutta from the Anguttara Book of Elevens, where the Buddha is speaking to the layman Mahānāma, who basically asks, how should I conduct myself and manage my spiritual practice and my mental development in the midst of being a busy person and in the midst of various responsibilities and duties. And the Buddha's answer was to recommend 5 mental qualities to be developed. And then he gave 6 meditations or contemplations. And we're going through these one by one. The 5 qualities to be developed is the same list as the 5 indriya or faculties. It's one of the very important lists for managing our spiritual life, because it consists of balanced pairs that have to be developed in tandem. If one gets ahead of the other, if they're not balanced, then the spiritual life will go awry. Things will not progress as they should. And these 2 pairs are samadhi and energy as the inner pair, and faith and wisdom as the outer pair. And in the middle is sati, the balancing point, the fulcrum. Sati is required in all circumstances. And this is going to be the theme of our talk today, is sati, which is generally translated as mindfulness. Some of the older translations use the term recollectedness for sati, which in some ways is although it's a kind of an awkward word, it is closer to the proper meaning of sati, because there is a tie-in with memory. It's not the same thing as memory, but it does have a relation point to remembrance. The root of the word sati from the Sanskrit is Sanskrit smriti, which actually literally means memory. And there is in the Pali, in several places in the suttas and commentaries, there will be a phrase repeated often when some individual is being praised by the Buddha as being very mindful, having good sati. That is to say, in Pali, he is satimant. He is possessed of sati. The phrase is, so-and-so is satimant. He remembers easily that which was said and done long ago. This connection with recollection may seem surprising to some people who are used to modern presentations, because the emphasis is on being in the present moment, which is not wrong. It is an aspect of Sati that you're fully present, but that present moment is fully informed. So you have good Sati when you're situated fully awake. You're situated in the stream, the continuum of the mind, fully awake, and you understand where you are, who you are, what's going on, what you need to do. This is the full gamut of Sati, recollectedness. This connection with recollection can also be seen in a principle of Abhidhamma, in the cognitive series, which is the study of the particular functions the mind manifests as it cognizes an object. Like you see an apple sitting on the table, or you hear a sound of a bird, or you think a thought. These are all objects that the mind cognizes and goes through a sequence of processes to process this information. And the mind does not always go through the entire series. There's a full series is 14 mind moments. Quite often the mind drops out and doesn't complete the full sequence, and that's being unmindful. And the mind drops away before the sequence is finished. Only when one is fully alert and mindful does the sequence complete. And towards the end of the sequence, there is a process called tadaramana, which is translated as registration consciousness. What it means is that the mental object that has been discerned is now registered. So it's like putting it away in the memory banks. It's now fully taken in. So it's now like a possession of the mind. It's now held, so it's not lost. So, for example, a practical application of this is if you find yourself one of those persons who's always losing their pen or their car keys, and where did I put that damn thing? The solution is, when you put it down, to be mindful. So let consciousness play all the way through to tadaramana. Then you don't have to make an effort to keep remembering where you put it. When you need it, it'll be there. You'll say, oh yes, that's where I put it, because you've registered it. And this is a product of mindfulness. So also, there are, in both Theravada forest monastery practice, and I've also heard the same thing, or very close analog in Zen tradition, that when a teacher wants to test a student how mindful he is, when the student comes to see the teacher will ask him something like, which side of the door did you put your shoes on? And if the student's very mindful, he'll be aware of whether he put his shoes to the left or right of the door. But if he's scatterbrained and he's not mindful of what he's doing, he won't recall. He'll have to guess. So mindfulness, or sati, is being fully present, having recollectedness, being situated, fully awake. So it's very much related to the concept of wakefulness. A good practice for developing sati is to make an effort when you wake up in the morning to wake up quickly, not to loll about in bed and daydream and fall in and out of sleep, but immediately get up and be fully on. That helps to develop a keen awareness and a sati, a sense of being present, remembering to be present. That's probably the best phrase for describing sati, remembering to be present. There's a story that I came across in my reading from a different tradition, and it uses somewhat different concepts and language, but I think it illustrates the principle of sati very well. This is from a writing by Uspensky, who was one of the students of Gurdjieff. And one of the practices that they were taught to follow was in every situation to remember yourself, to remember your part of the scene, right? We tend, if you're, let's say, in a crowded room or you're walking in the street, your consciousness is naturally going out to the outer world, to the other people, the buildings, the cars, and so on, and you forget that you're present. So it seems sort of an un-Buddhist approach to put this kind of emphasis on self, but properly understood, it's not. It's taking into account the full picture, remembering to be present. So Uspensky describes himself practicing this exercise while he was walking around the streets on his daily errands in Copenhagen. And he was always remembering to be that he's part of the scene, remembering to be present. And one of his stops was at a tobacconist to get some pipe tobacco. And he went into the shop and immediately got lost in the sensuality of the different odors and aromas of the different grades of tobacco as he made his selection. And he lost his practice and forgot to be present. And he says it was sometime later, a half hour or an hour later, and he was several blocks away doing something else, and he remembered that he should be doing this practice, and he came back to it, and he says it felt like everything in between was like a dream. It didn't feel fully real. So when we're not, and I think that's a very astute observation. In the first place, the stream of sati was lost by sense desire, by getting fascinated and lost in the aromas of the different grades of tobacco. He lost his thread of consciousness. The other point is that when he wasn't practicing and he looked back at that time from a position of sati, that period when he wasn't practicing felt like a dream. And that means, he was not fully awake. And I think most people in the world, most of the time, are basically sleepwalking. They go around carrying out their emotions without being fully aware, conscious, or present. And this is a lack of sati. In the context of the five indriya, sati is the fulcrum. It's the balance point between the two complementary pairs, and is said to be required in all situations. And the Visuddhimagga gives the analogy, just as salt improves the flavor of every dish. So that may be perhaps doubtful from a culinary point of view, but I don't think Buddhaghosa was known particularly for his cooking skills. But the point is that sati is not balanced with anything else. It's something that's required at all times at whatever maximum capacity you can manage to be fully awake and present and aware. And it serves the function in terms of the five indriya of giving you the picture of where you're at with the other factors and what needs to be balanced, particularly the pair between energy and samadhi. And this is really a huge component of skill in meditation, is whenever we lose the thread of our meditation, whenever the meditation is not going well, the mind has wandered off either into dullness or into restlessness, and the two opposite extremes. And this is a result of an imbalance of the faculties. If there's not enough energy, but the samadhi is relatively stronger, then the samadhi will be unenergized, it won't be bright, and it'll become kind of hypnotic and sleep-inducing. On the other hand, if there's no samadhi, but the energy level is high, this will lead to restlessness and agitation and monkey mind, as well as discomfort in the body, wishing to move the body. And Sati keeps track of where you're at. You say, oh, I'm feeling a bit restless now. I better put an emphasis on stillness and rein it in. Or I'm feeling dull and sleepy. I better energize. And Sati is the faculty that's able to discern that. I should also mention for completeness that sometimes Sati is paired with another faculty or a very closely related faculty called Sampojanya, which is often translated clear comprehension. And this is really should be considered kind of an aspect of Sati that is the reaching beyond the present moment awareness of the situation at the present moment and putting things into context, seeing a broader picture. Because Sati, there is, despite the emphasis on that I was wanting you to understand about the relationship to recollectedness, it is an emphasis on a very precise momentary noticing. But Sampajanya is broader in scope and takes into account context and purpose, suitability, and so on. But in general, the thing to remember is that Sati means you're fully awake. It's wakefulness, it's alertness, it's and I would think the phrase to define it in one term is remembering to be present. Okay, so I'll leave that as my remarks on the faculty of Sati, and we'll turn to the chat and deal with questions. There seems to be some material in the chat already. Let's see if it's in the form of questions. Is this okay? We're jumping around in the chat. Is this why some suttas go forward and then say the same things in reverse order to strengthen a person's sati, if they can memorize the whole sutta that way? Yes, the form the suttas takes is often defined or dictated by the fact that they were originally oral literature and they were memorized. So they tend to be very repetitive and formulaic in places for ease of memorization. And if they were written down in the first place, they would have taken a different form, I'm sure. Is sati synonymous of memory? If one has good sati, does this mean one has good memory? Is someone with photographic memory, perfect memory, has good sati? As I said, sati is not, I wouldn't define it as synonymous with memory. I think it's closely related to memory, and that, yes, if someone has good sati, they will have good memory. This is what uh, this phrase that the Buddha uses several times to praise someone who's mindful. He says, he is satimant, he can recollect easily that which was done and said long ago. Ananda was said to have a eidetic or perfect memory. That was why he was required at the first council, that he could recall everything the Buddha said quite accurately. So that would imply that he had good sati. I know someone with a photographic memory was born with that skill who could also be very absent-minded. Yeah, someone might have sati but not have it all the time. And if they are originally, from an early age showing a good photographic memory, I would say that must be a result of having practiced in previous lifetimes. Is part of sati recollecting the Eightfold Path? Is that the recollection? Yes, certainly. Yeah, that's part of it. Remembering the Dhamma, remembering what you ought to be doing. You're in the car, you just left the store and realize the cashier forgot to ring up an item that's in the bag. Is it bad karma if you don't go back in to pay for it? Yeah, I would say it probably is. It probably is a bad karma. It is taking that which is not given. So it would be a second precept, a violation of second precept. And it probably is going to end up coming out of the cashier's pocket at the end of the day. So you could consider that. It may be good enough to, if it's situation is such that it's difficult for you to, or you're in a time constraint, is to just pay for it the next time you're in. To say, well, last time I was in here, they probably might even let you off the payment, but you should make an effort. How would we make use of sati versus marana recollection in the course of our day as a mode of practice? Marana recollection, for those who don't recognize the Pali, is contemplation of death, remembering that you are mortal, basically, that I too shall die, to bring that reflection forward. And that is also a specialized kind of sati, because you're recollecting the fact that you are going to die. I don't think you need to be doing that continually throughout the day, but the Buddha did recommend that we remind ourselves of that fact every day. And you can do it as a formal meditation. The Visuddhimagga has a big write-up on it. But I think the most important thing with Maranasati is just that you make it real for yourself that you are mortal, that you shall die. And that could be seen as an aspect of sati because you're recollecting your aspect of reality. Ajahn, I am not clear if chitta is the same or different than vijnana. My thinking is that vijnana can be deduced whenever there is namarupa. This is how to deduce chitta as well. Okay, the difference between chitta and vijnana, that's a really big topic. And it's also controversial. There are different opinions on the matter. There are, well, I'll say first of all that vijnana is used mostly in the suttas and chitta is used mostly in the Abhidhamma, although that it's not exclusively in either case. And some, I know Nyanaponika in the Buddhist dictionary, he does state his opinion that they're synonyms, that they're just used in different one in Sutta, one in Abhidhamma, different sources, but they mean the same thing. Other writers and teachers have taken a different view, and the Thai forest tradition often uses chitta in a very specialized way as well. The way I generally would approach it, and my opinion on it, is that chitta is the more general term. Chitta is consciousness per se, pure consciousness. And vijnana is more contextual. It's the consciousness operating in the mode of the sense organs primarily. So it's the applied consciousness. In the suttas, we find vijnana used in at least 3 different contexts, all kind of specialized. One is sense consciousness. We talk about eye consciousness, ear consciousness, so on. That's vijnana. The other one is in the dependent origination. After mental, because of mental formations, there is consciousness, and that's described as patisandhi vijnana. So it's qualified, and that means rebirth linking consciousness. So it's the first consciousness to arise in the new continuum. And the third context would be in the 5 khandha, one of which is vijnana or consciousness. And chitta is used in the Abhidhamma as one of the primary realities. There are 4 primary realities in Abhidhamma that are irreducible. The Paramattha Dhammas. There's a chitta, consciousness, chitasaka, which is all other mental functioning, rupa or body, and nibbana. But there's a lot more that could be said about this question. It's a big question, and there's a lot of nuance and a lot of different opinions on it. Okay, next question. I feel there is no difference between to be in present moment and mindfulness. Is it correct, Ajahn? Yes, if you're fully in the present moment, if you're fully cognizant of the present moment and what it means, what it implies, then yes, that is mindfulness. So remembering to be present, remembering to be in the present moment, remembering to be here, remembering you are here, perhaps better way of saying it, which would be close to the Ouspensky's practice. Did you refer to one pair of powers as inner and the other outer? Could you say more about that, please? Yeah, that's a distinction. The inner pair and the outer pair. That's a distinction I use to make it intuitive. The difference between the two. The inner pair are energy and samadhi, virya and samadhi, which I call them inner because they're immediately present in the practice of meditation. They're this present moment is an issue at this present moment, whether I'm too restless or though Ananda was best in mindfulness, why couldn't he progress in Dhamma quickly? It was probably because of his meritorious practice of looking after the Buddha for so many years. For the last 20 years of the Buddha's life, he was the Buddha's attendant, and he was very diligent in that practice. He was probably in that way too outward oriented to make an inner breakthrough. Although he was making such good merit that when he finally was able to let go of that, he attained the stages up to arahantship. For those who are not familiar with the story, Ananda was a stream winner already in the during the Buddha's lifetime, but he was unable to progress any further. And after the Buddha entered Parinibbana, the elders wanted to hold, under the leadership of Mahākāccana, the elders wanted to hold a council to codify the Buddhist teaching so they wouldn't be lost to future generations. And they wanted to have 500 of elder monks, all arahants. And it was important that Ananda attend because he knew all the Buddhist teachings, but he wasn't not yet an arahant. So he was told that there was 3 months before the council, go into retreat and practice hard and see if you can attain arahantship. And he practiced very diligently with his very, very methodical, diligent nature that he had. He devoted himself to the practice, and it was the night before the council, and he still hadn't attained, and he determined he's going to do walking meditation all night. But then he became exhausted, and he lay down on his bed, and in between the sitting posture and the lying posture, he went through 3 stages of breakthrough, became an arahant. And it seems like that there was a very subtle clinging left in him up to that point. Like he was so well-meaning and so diligent, he was trying so hard, but it's only when he let go of that expectation that his work bore fruit, and he became an arahant. It happened this is a reference, I guess, to that grocery store incident. It happened an hour ago. If I take it back now, will I make up the bad karma? Well, the karma is kind of complicated. It would depend on where your mind was at the moment of realizing you hadn't paid. If you were thinking, "Oh, I got away with this can of beans for free, great," and then there's a small bad karma there. But now, if you take it back, that you don't really eliminate the bad karma, but you make good karma, and it may outweigh the bad karma. But it seems like in any case, a small. There's many worse things that you could have done. What is the difference or relation between the 5 strengths and the 4 iddhipadas? Well, they're 2 separate lists, and all of these lists have some overlap and relations. The 5 indriya or bala, I think that would be the translation you're using. Strength is the 5 bala. It's the same list, actually, under a different name. They are relating to balancing one's practice, maintaining a balance point in practice, whereas the 4 iddhipadas, or the roads to success or the roads to power, they're not one of the lists that have an inner balancing, but they're 4 faculties to be developed for success in any endeavor. Question: I feel that without mindfulness, no Buddha Dhamma practice. Is that correct? Yeah, mindfulness is essential. It's also, of course, one of the Eightfold Path factors. So without the Eightfold Path, without all 8 path factors, there's no complete Buddha Dhamma, no complete practice. Could you speak some more about the 14 mind moments you mentioned in the talk? I don't really want to get into that here. That's another really big topic. You can find, I did talks on Abhidhamma previously. You can find on my channel, and you can also find much literature on this. A good source is Bhikkhu Bodhi's Manual of Abhidhamma. The 14 mind moments are called the Chitta Vritti, and it's one of the kind of core teachings of Abhidhamma. It's an analysis of how the mind cognizes an object. It goes through 14 stages of processing. Can the meaning of vijnana be knowledge acquired through senses, Bhante? Yes, if we include the mind sense as well as the sixth sense, because that's also vijnana. It's mano vijnana. So it's consciousness operating through the senses. That is one meaning of vijnana, and I think it's probably the primary meaning. Does vipassana practice relate to developing sati factor and jhana to developing samadhi in the Eightfold Path? As a general principle, yes, you're correct, but both of them would involve sati and samadhi, but the emphasis would be different. With vipassana, the emphasis is on sati, and in jhana, it's on samadhi. But both are required in either case. Are you familiar with the monk Jnanavira? Could you make a video explaining Jnanavira's interpretation of Paticca Samuppada? Many thanks. Yeah, I am familiar with him. It's been a long time since I've read his books. I'll keep that in mind, a possibility of doing a video on his interpretation. That might be interesting. Jnanavira was had a really big influence in his writings. Had a big influence on modern Theravada for sure. Just to clarify, if I had great sati while driving, let's say, I'm able to remember directions as it pertains to my driving. Is it necessary to mentally label everything we do in our minds to practice mindfulness? There's a head monk from Burma who recommends I practice this way. Well, this was a couple of different questions here. Sati while driving, yes, certainly. If driving is a good example of where this sati as remembering to be present is very, is applied in real life. That if you're driving in traffic and there's different road signs and directions, and you got to pay attention to the engine of your car, and many things. That the mind has to be very awake and alert and attentive, unless you're going to get in trouble and have an accident. So good driving is definitely an application of sati. And if the mind is not paying attention, then that's when you make mistakes and could get into an accident. Is it necessary to mentally label everything within our minds to practice mindfulness correctly? That is the technique that was popularized by Mahasi Sayadaw, and it's a very powerful technique of meditation. That's how actually I started practicing the Mahasi tradition, and I still think it's a very excellent and powerful practice. I don't think it's something you can practically do while you're engaged in an activity in a busy life. There's too much going on to label everything. But as an exercise to do in meditation, is very powerful because it develops a precision of noticing that I think is often missing in people's practice. Is this kind of scalpel-like clarity of what is the object of consciousness at this moment, present right now. And this is Tatra Majjhatata, being in the middle about that, being absolutely present with the object of consciousness that changes moment by moment. And it's a skill to be developed. It's like the mind becomes very quick and sharp. It's not like a fuzzy general awareness. It's like a very sharp It's almost like a strobe light on reality. And this labeling or noting practice is a way of developing that. So yeah, I'm in favor of that practice for sure. Do we reflect on our sati like generosity and virtue mentioned in the suttas we are studying? Um, well, not really. There is no meditation of recollecting of sati. Sati is something you practice in the immediacy. It's not you don't kind of make a point of recollecting it retroactively. I understand some monks recommend labeling phenomena to help rule you to a present moment, while others do not. Yeah, there's actually all kinds of different ways and techniques of developing vipassana, which means clear seeing. I like to say that vipassana is best understood as an attitude or a state of mind, not as a meditation. And the meditation methods are not so much vipassana themselves, but they're ways of developing vipassana. And the labeling method of Mahasi is only one possible way of doing it. It happens to be the one that I know the best, but there are others, and they're probably just as as useful. According to Buddhism, sati is to know anicca and anatta from moment to moment. Is it correct? Yes. What I would say about that is that when sati develops to the point where it's very mature and sharp and keen, then the three characteristics, anicca, anatta, and also dukkha, become readily apparent moment by moment. If I continually practice mindfulness, I will become 100% crippled. E.g., I am blinking my eye, I'm breathing, the traffic turned on, I am pressing the gas. To what extent? Yeah, exactly. You can't. You should be practicing sati all the time, whatever, being fully mindful, but you can't do that moment by moment noting in the middle of busy activity. That's not what it's intended for. To what extent does one have to be in the now and be mindful? As far as you can. It's something to be developed at all times. Is it better to not meditate and simply focus on sense restraint until you acquire right view? Wouldn't it be to be meditating on top of these wrong views and possibly with sensuality? Well, it depends on the meditation. If you're doing anapanasati, for example, you're not going to. There's really no danger to that. You can't go wrong, and that's not reinforcing any wrong views, but it's allowing the mind to calm and find peace, which will give you a space in which wisdom can arise. Um, Sense restraint is very important for as a prerequisite for deep meditation. Um, but I don't think you have to wait until you're perfect in sense restraint and perfect in sila before you begin meditating. They all develop together. When reflecting on anicca and dukkha, not me, not mine, not myself, is there overlap? Yes, certainly. Not me, not mine, not myself is the definition of anatta. Is developing a penetration of anatta. Can sati induce jhana states? No, not as such, because they're more induced by samadhi. Um, but it is said by for example, in the Mahasi Sayadaw school, his writings, he talks about uh, the mind with very keen sati has an experience of momentary uh, near jhana on changing objects. So that the state, the amount, the intensity of the filling of consciousness by a single object is the same in, or nearly the same in jhana or in deep vipassana. But the difference is in vipassana, the object is constantly changing. For my Sati practice, would it be okay to just remind myself to stay in the present moment without labeling everything, both during sitting meditation and while doing other activities? Labeling everything just seems a little too mechanical, even during sitting meditation. It's just okay. Um, well, certainly, as I said, in the middle of activity, it's not really practical to do the labeling. The labeling does have an advantage in developing that precision. As long as you can be present with the object, the labeling is not important. It's a secondary thing, but it's a way many people find is a skillful way of developing that keen awareness of the present moment object. Otherwise, the mind is likely to slip into a kind of a vague, fuzzy awareness that doesn't really catch the objects. In certain sutta, why Sariputta tells Rahula to practice anapanasati, but the Buddha instructs other things for him, like four elements, brahmaviharas, etc. Well, they're all aspects of practice, and they all have their particular virtues. So you can't just say one practice is the only one that's of value. So the Buddha gives him Sariputta gives him anapana, and then the Buddha gives him some additional practices. I don't see there's any contradiction there. Okay, so I think we'll round it up, and next, or wrap it up, I should say. And next week, the topic will be samadhi, and that is the indriya or faculty that's balanced with energy. And it's quite a lot to say about samadhi. It's quite an important concept, and it's also one of the Eightfold Path factors, along with Sati. So we'll see you all next week, and thank you for attending today. I hope it was of some use.